getting that starting wage and getting with an employer who has an educational benefits program was truly a life changer for this young fellow.
You know, Louis, a key part of your success has really been developing partnerships with people in the corporate world and people in, I would say, people in government and philanthropists. Tell us a little bit about how you've gone about developing those partnerships that really make you effective, and even with the unions. I mean, you've worked on all of this.
Certainly. So as I mentioned, I was an Army officer for 10 years. And if you follow what's going on television, you see that before anything really kicks off, the diplomacy, going around building up allies, and making sure that we hunt as a pack is the way that we do business at the national level. Well, I brought that home. And I spent a lot of times, one of my figures from history is a guy named Otto von Bismarck. He was his Chancellor of Prussia. And he kept Prussia, he kept a ring of allies around Prussia so nobody could ever attack him. I use that with some. So community groups, churches, you go to them, everybody in the neighborhood is poor. So if you're bringing jobs to the neighborhood, they're glad to see you. The government was a little bit more difficult because the elected officials always want to know what to do the unions thing. I said, what do you think they think? But that's not what I'm here talking about. So you had to use a little pressure on them, all right? The Lyndon Johnson School of Leadership is the one I subscribe to. You know, grab by the stack slow and get the job done. Businesses were, and today it's a lot easier. I have banks calling me now because they need mortgage officers in the banks. You got the insurance companies that need people all over the place. And they want to solve problems. So if you know, George Floyd was murdered here in Minneapolis, so the sense of social responsibility is at a heightened level, like nothing like we've seen since maybe affirmative action. 5 major banks came to me and said, less than 1% of the bank mortgage loan officers in the United States are black. Hear me now, less than 1%. So is there bias in the system you think? Maybe, all right. And they want me to put together a national training program to help solve that problem. What the real important piece of that is that they had credit, they had confidence in us the same way a major affordable housing provider with these apartment complexes wants me to put learning labs on their property so that their people can go to school right there and bring the babies down to the activity center. So these are the types of things that are happening now, Glenn. And even the unions at this point, they finally sunk in after 20 years. You're not going to live forever, sport. You had less children, and you didn't want them to go into construction, so they're not following you. And you need somebody to pay the union dues and keep you politically strong. Well, meet my friends from North Minneapolis, all right? Ones that live around Martin Luther King Boulevard in some place, you know what I'm talking about.
That's right.
So it's a great place, it's a great time to be in this business.
You know, it's interesting what you just said about this, because in Minneapolis we've got this thing, and maybe it's true around the country, we have a job vacancy crisis. It's not that there's too many people to work, or you know, it's that there's too many jobs that are open and there aren't enough people to go to work. And so it's a great opportunity to close the equity gap, to begin to have people of all races and all kinds of backgrounds going to work. I talked to one of you. You told me you have a new warehouse for Amazon going into your community. You've got that. It's got to be filled with great opportunities for people to go to work. So Louis is preparing those things. Louis, you're now the CEO of OIC International. So tell us a little bit about OIC as a big organization. Would they ever like to partner with the Salvation Army in cities?
Absolutely. But one thing I learned long ago, all politics are local. So saying you got a national level deal is one thing, but the real deal is working together down on the ground. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm glad you're coming to me from Melbourne versus Camp or St. Pete or, Miami or even Jacksonville, because smaller communities tend not to have a lot of resources. And so you don't get a lot of resistance trying to bring them assets that add value to their people. So I'm very interested in working with local organizations, regardless of who they are, because Glenn, you're absolutely right. We have to get America to work, all right? The opioid crisis is killing us, and it's, again, a very quiet thing, and I'm talking about a lot, but it's now seen as a workforce issue, and I think groups like the Salvation Army are prime ways to find folks and get them in the game.
Well, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up on that?
Well, you got my contact info, so that's what we need. Just give it to them, and if they're a friend of yours, they're a friend of mine, and
Awesome.
we got all work together on this thing. Like I said, America works when America works together.
Well, that's beautiful. And one of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about with Lewis here is they actually created a pipeline for folks who don't have a high school degree. And they're fast-tracking folks the way public education could never fast-track folks. If they want to get into a vocation, they have programs now that start with folks who can't read, and they move them through, fairly quickly in programs to
10
get
weeks.
GED.
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
10 weeks. And the interesting thing, Glenn, I thought I was going to get a bunch of young 19-year-old, 25-year-old skinnies, right? You have a lot of people walking around in their 30s and 40s, working every day, who do not have a GED.
Wow.
And they live in shame, and they have a glass ceiling that's holding them down. And so they come in to get that credential so they can take the next step. And we treat it just like a classroom. Show up every day, 8:30, 2:30, click, 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 all down the line, unless, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and then we do it virtually. But it is definitely needed. And the other end of that is make sure you get to the young children, because they're the workers of tomorrow and workers of the future. And we don't have anybody to waste. There's no such thing as a throwaway person now. We are not in a labor surplus situation anymore. And we're not going to be there for the next 20 years, which most of us won't be around to worry about.
Question.
Wow. Well, Lewis, thank you so much. Yes, we have a question over here. Go ahead.
Is the program bilingual?
Bilingual?
Yes.
What's the question?
Yeah. Said, is the program bilingual?
It is not.
How can we help make it that way?
You won't, because it's accredited by, it's an institution of higher learning, and you have one curriculum. There are ESL classes that you can go to prior to coming here. We don't quite have the same issues in Minnesota as you might have in Florida with a heavy Latino population, but they also have a very robust English as a second language program apparatus, and we have a lot of immigrants here. The Hmong community is big. We have a large Somali community in town, in the nation, and we have a strong but not nearly comparative to Florida Latino population. The best thing to do is to build the pipeline starting with ESL and then feed it into the training.
Yeah, in Minneapolis, we have 126 different languages of kids who start elementary school. So bilingual is not really the issue. English is a second language, definitely is for us. So, any other questions that you might have for Lewis right now?
I've just got to say,
Speak up loud.
great respect, Lewis, from a fellow redleg, Germany Field Artillery, 1980s.
Cool.
All right,
Huh?
yeah, and great respect for what you're doing. And is there any other wisdom you carried over from Field Artillery or the Army that you want to share with us?
Here's something wow, I got a red leg in the crowd, right? That's what they call artillerymen. So they tell us that we live in dignity what will otherwise become an ugly brawl. And it taught me the importance of A, being on time, and B, being accurate. So thank you for your service, and certainly for being an artilleryman, which I think is the greatest craft they ever invented.
Well, thank you for your service. God bless you, my brother.
Any other questions? Louis, thank you for your time. It was, you're always an inspiration. And, you know, I know everyone's inspired after hearing from you today. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some follow-up contact.
I really do. This is great, Glenn. Thank you so much for this opportunity. You know, I wouldn't know where to go if I landed in Melbourne or Tallahassee. So I would love to, you know, if you guys are interested at all, I will follow up with whoever reaches out to me, because I do want to do some things in the Panhandle.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Louis. You're a blessing. God bless you
Two steps to
today.
the real out of here.
Thank you. Bye now. So that was inspirational, wasn't it? I tell you, every time I meet with Louis, he inspires me in so many ways. And he took his military training and his background, and he turned it toward his community. How can we help? And you know what? Salvation Army. What is that? It's military, right? You guys are in God's army, trying to help folks as well. What did you hear? What did you learn from this? Yes.
Can you just get his contact information before you forget?
What does OAC stand for?
It stands for, it's an unusual title, OIC, but this is something that was started by Louis Sullivan. Louis Sullivan was a pastor, well, he was actually a business guy in Philadelphia, an African American, but it's Opportunity Industrial Centers. Opportunity Industrial Centers. Louis just became, on January 1st, he just stepped into the role of CEO for all the Opportunity Industrial Centers around America. And there's about 31 right now, but I think, from what I can tell, when Louis gets in charge of it, it's going to grow. There's going to be new chapters, and I think he'd probably love to see chapters in your area.
He wants to go to 33 right away.
I think he wants to go to,
These
yeah,
two.
he wants to go to these two, right? He'd like to be in Tallahassee and Melbourne with you. And it's such a practical way for people to get to a point where they're earning a family supportive wage. And it lifts their dignity. So let me do this. I can give this to Angela, and she can distribute to everyone who's here Louis King's information. Would that be a good way to go?
Sure.
Angela?
Sure.
Angela, I think I have your cell phone, don't I? Let me just check. Because I'm going to send it to you by cell phone. Reggie, why don't you take other questions while I send this off? Just keep the debrief going.
I should have asked him this question, as far as young people, like, of course, I represent Department of Juvenile Justice, so how would this affect young people that we have in the system? I mean, is that going to be a negative in order for them to be able to get into these training programs?
That is a great question to follow up, and I didn't hear him talk about, although apparently he does have a number of folks that have come out of prison.
I know that's the
He
thing.
said he never turned anybody back.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because he said the best social program is a job.
Yeah.
And the Gallup folks, when they put together their well-being survey about a dozen years ago, the number one correlative to a sense of well-being is for a person to have a full-time job.
Yeah.
Number one, it trumps faith, it trumps family, it trumps everything else. But when you think about it, I mean, the Bible starts off in a garden.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Adam had work to do when he woke up, you know, and I mean, it's not like, you know, because God prepared work ahead of time. So Adam, that's part of what it means to become a human. I mean, to be a human. And so when we rob people of that, we're robbing them of that. So it's just interesting. Worldwide, that's true, by the way. That's not an American only thing. That is worldwide. And we're not talking about pushing a cart, flower cart, full-time job in, benefits.
With
you
a
know.
$60,000 a year
Yeah, pretty good.
salary, I mean, it's not bad. Yeah, well, there are jobs out there. In fact, it's hard to get a job at Amazon, at an Amazon warehouse. Chances are pretty good HR is going to screen a lot of people out. You know what? I was telling someone earlier, Jerry, today, about a group in the Bronx in New York called Grayston Bakery. They make all the brownies for Ben and Jerry's ice cream, okay? And they have something they call open hiring. This is a movement that's going on in some of the larger corporations now all over America, where they take the first application off the top of the list and that person's hired. And in this case, they have to be able to lift an 80-pound bag of flour to be hired. But that's the only qualification. It's not their education. It's not whether they were homeless. It was not whether they were in jail. They're hired. And then their HR department, instead of weeding people out, comes alongside them to help them succeed. And so open hiring as a movement is incredible. They take the profits of their company and they have 2 nonprofits on site. One to help them understand the work culture and make sure they fit in. And the other nonprofit is there to help take care of child care and make sure that they're freed up to serve in their new role as an employee. So HR now helps them succeed instead of helping weed them out. And that's turning things on its head. What else did you hear? What else did you learn?
I love that this can be